We are on location and all local this week as we bring you Milwaukee area art that reaches beyond our city. On this episode of the Arts Page, get an inside look at the costumes of the PBS hit show Downton Abbey that you can visit this summer in Oshkosh. Tempt your taste buds with mouth-watering kitchen art by a Milwaukee food photographer. And see how two Milwaukee organizations creatively collaborated to preserve a part of the Holocaust history that has a local connection. That's all coming up now on the Arts Page. Welcome to the Arts Page. I'm your host, Sandy Max. We are on location at the Charles Allis Art Museum in Milwaukee. Charles Allis, the first president of the Allis-Chalmers Manufacturing Company, and his wife Sarah had this Tudor-style mansion designed in 1911 with the purpose of giving it and their personal art collection to the public to enjoy. The Allis' art collection features a wide range of work, including 19th century French and American paintings, Chinese and Japanese porcelains, and original antique furnishings, like the ones you see here in the French parlor. Wisconsin is filled with art collections, and Wisconsin curators are often eager to welcome art collections from around the world. Oshkosh, Wisconsin is one of the first stops of a new touring exhibit spotlighting Downton Abbey, the hit PBS masterpiece series. Downton Abbey follows the story of the aristocratic Crawley family and their servants in England during the early 20th century. A collection of costumes from the phenomenally popular TV show has arrived at the Paine Art Center and Gardens. From the Dowager Countess's hat to Anna Bates's apron, from evening dresses to uniforms, let us give you a personal tour inside Dressing Downton, changing fashion for changing times.
The buzz or the anticipation for this show has been greater than any we have ever done in the past. So the fans are avid, they are willing to drive, the costumes are gorgeous, and the whole exhibition really focuses on placing those costumes within their historical context and then bringing them to life. The Paine Art Center and Gardens in Oshkosh is an English-style country estate that was built by Nathan and Jessie Kimberly Paine in the 1920s, and we have been open to the public since 1948 as an art museum, historic estate, and botanical garden. Summer 2015 at the Paine, we are featuring Dressing Downton, changing fashion for changing times. And it's a fantastic exhibition of 36 costumes from the period drama Downton Abbey, which is a PBS masterpiece series. It's put together by Exhibits Development Group out of St. Paul, Minnesota, and they have worked with Cosprop, which is the costume house in London that provides many of the costumes for Downton Abbey. We have 36 costumes from seasons 1 through 4 of the television series, and it shows fashions and how they changed from 1912, when the series began with the sinking of the Titanic, through World War I and into the 1920s and the Jazz Age. When visitors enter the exhibition, they enter through the main gallery first, and in the main gallery we have about a third of the 36 costumes on view, and they are accompanied by beautiful large-scale film still photo murals. So they show the scene in which the costume was worn by the actor, and visitors can go through the different costumes. They're also accompanied by signs which tell the importance of the fashion, the importance of the costume, or the scene that it was worn in. And they really are fantastic accompaniments that bring all of these scenes back to life for the avid viewer of Downton Abbey. And then once they leave the main gallery, they will visit the period rooms of the Paine Mansion. And in all of the period rooms, there are costumes. The mansion was never lived in by the Paine family, so it's the first time really the rooms have come to life. They now have inhabitants, and the costume placements within the period rooms were chosen for a reason. They complement the decor or the purpose of the room, and so it's a really fun way to walk through and envision the Paine mansion as if it were Highclere Castle and the fictional Downton Abbey. Viewers can really get up close and see all of that amazing handwork that is done for these costumes. So the lace, the embroidery, the beadwork, it's all hand-sewn details. So you can actually look and linger rather than just trying to catch a 1-second frame on TV. The fashions in Downton Abbey in seasons 1 through 4 go through a dramatic shift. What was happening between 1912 and the 1920s in terms of fashion and hemlines and silhouettes. You go from that Edwardian period and very formal and ornate, and then World War I occurs, 1914 to 1918, and it lessens the formality of the clothing worn by these aristocratic families. The Crawley daughters in the series, they were, the daughters of the Earl of Grantham, yet they're going to work during World War I. Sybil is a nurse, and Downton Abbey becomes an infirmary for wounded soldiers, so she works as a nurse, and you see that costume. You also see Lady Edith, who worked as a land girl, helping some of the tenant farmers on the estate, and you see her outfit and her wonderful bicycle. And you also see a shortening of hemlines starting to come up. So there's a lot of change that takes place, and then by the time you get into the 1920s, the silhouette has completely transformed. You either have a dropped waist or no waistline at all. It's a completely straight silhouette with a boyish look. Then you get to the flapper period, and it's a lot more bare and exposed. You're showing a lot more ankle and lower leg, and also the arms. So it's just a greater freedom and independence for the time period. My favorite character is the one played by Maggie Smith, the Dowager Countess, Lady Violet. This lilac dress is worn during her kind of mid-range mourning period after her relatives had perished in the sinking of the Titanic. It's very traditional, it's very Edwardian. It has the bustle and then the S shape of the corset. It really captures the essence of her character. We have very fine clothing worn by the men of the house, Matthew Crawley and the Earl of Grantham. White tie dinnerware. We also have military costumes. They were based on historical reference material. Also hunting outfits and outfits used for leisure, walking and hiking on the estate, and they're in fine country tweeds. We have the downstairs staff represented by 3 costumes in the exhibition. We have a footman in the dining room, which is very appropriate. We also have in our upstairs dressing room, which would have been Mrs. Paine's dressing room, we have on view a beautiful evening gown worn by Lady Mary Crawley, and then the costume of her lady's maid, Anna, who's one of the most beloved characters. Her maid's costume is shown, and she's actually dressing Mary in the dressing room. We also have the character of Mrs. Hughes, the housekeeper, and we have that costume on view in our own servants' quarters. We never had a staff at the Paine mansion since it was never inhabited. Mrs. Hughes is our first servant at the Paine mansion. We have her set up with a desk in the back servants' hallway. It's a real variety that you can see in the exhibition, both with men's costumes and women's. The props are a really important aspect so that it's not just a rigid mannequin in a costume. They really do make it more real for the viewer and are a terrific enhancement. We have 5 costumes on view in the Great Hall, and the room itself is a magnificent prop for the costumes. We have our Persian silk rug out, we have our grand piano out. Those characters all look like they're having a great party in the middle of our great hall. The Paine is very excited to be the only Wisconsin venue for this traveling exhibition. When you're having an exhibition that extends beyond just the main gallery and goes into the rooms, viewers have a much greater appreciation for the settings and how it all fits together in a cohesive experience.
Dressing Downton, Changing Fashion for Changing Times is on display now until September 20th, 2015 at the Paine Arts Center and Gardens in Oshkosh. Find all the information to plan your visit to the exhibit at the website thepaine.org. The dining room here at the Charles Allis Art Museum has a rich and luxurious feel. In it, you'll see art from Paris and from China. Art brings people together, food brings people together, so how about food art? Talented Milwaukee food photographer Grace Natoli Sheldon has created tantalizing layouts for the pages of Taste of Home magazine. She also creates vivid, colorful kitchen art.
The textures and the smells and I mean the lighting, it just speaks to me. It makes me happy. It puts a smile on my face. My name is Grace Natoli Sheldon. I am a food photographer and I live in Milwaukee. I'm a food photographer / prop stylist. A food stylist is more of the person that will cook the food for you, so I work with a lot of food stylists. I'm a prop stylist or a set stylist and a food photographer, kind of all mixed it into one. I actually went to photo school to MATC. The art class that I took happened to be photography. And I liked it and I continued on with that. But while I was shooting, for my classes, I was always shooting food. All the teachers would tease me because it was like, if we were shooting symmetry, I'd have apples lined up in a row, or whatever we were shooting, it was food related. So I always knew that I would shoot food. Kitchen art is a thing I started years ago. I'm probably 35 years ago. It's art for kitchens. It's still lifes of food. It can be anything. For me, it's usually fruits and vegetables, and like I love vintage silverware and vintage plates and lots of metal and cool, right now all that repurposed wood is so hot, so that speaks to me. So that's what kitchen art. It's just a pretty image of food or food-related items that you would hang in your kitchen. Normally I like to bring it home and put it in my own setting and have my cool surfaces and my cool silverware. I'm all about the props. I love cloth, I love linens, and actually a lot of the stuff is left over from my family members too. I use a lot of my mother's dishes, and my mother-in-law has great props. Like all the silverware is from my mother-in-law's house. A lot of my kitchen artwork is backlit. It's a lot of bright colors and light and airy. I don't really have it figured out when I start, but as I'm going, then it kind of evolves. I've created a piece called Winter Harvest. For me, it's a more modern take on food photography. I started with the big things. I started with like a chunk of kale and some beets. It's sitting on a piece of slate. It's a beautiful surface and food looks awesome on it. What I do is I just start setting things down, and then I take a shot, see what I think, move it around, change the light. The light, it's all about the light to me. It's how the light hits the subject. I move the light around a lot. You have to be patient. You have to be like to putts. You have to I move, a piece of garlic 1/4 of an inch, and then I take a picture, and then it's like, ugh, and then I put it back. And so it's all about the composition, and it's all about the lighting and how it's falling. And then I go back and think, oh, that's too contrasty, or that's too not contrasting enough. But then there's the digital darkroom, the Photoshop, and all of that stuff. Time gets away from you. For me, I can spend a lot of time finessing, you know, the contrast and the saturation of the colors and just certain colors. And so there's a lot of editing that goes in. At least for me, I like to play with that, have my final result. You know, it's always just a work in progress. So that's the challenge, is just being patient and just taking your time. And for me, it's fun, so it's not challenging. The kitchen art I do for myself. It's you know, it's what speaks to me, what, you know, what I love. I light it the way I want to light it, that sort of thing. The commercial work is I work for somebody. I work for a client that has a product. So the difference is I still, you know, light it and I do everything and it's wonderful, but it's to their specifications. You have to be actually true to the product, but it still evokes the same feeling in me. It's still beautiful. I still enjoy it. It's great. The artist makes their own rules. For me, I just kind of make my own rules. As long as I'm true to the product. It's kind of just in me, you know, I just kind of do what comes to me naturally. People just say, you know, oh, I could just eat that, or I just want to lift it off the page, and it's how I feel. So it's nice that I'm getting other people to feel exactly how I'm feeling with my art, because really I'm doing it for me, and the fact that other people enjoy it too, that's like icing on the cake.
If you now have a craving for Grace Natoli Sheldon's decorative artwork, enjoy more of her photography at her website, gnsphoto.com. On display in the library of the Charles Allis Art Museum is a collection of paintings by 19th century American painters of the Hudson River School. These paintings are a piece of history, and preservation of history happens because people really care. The Jewish Museum Milwaukee recently collaborated with the Milwaukee Repertory Theater's costume department to preserve and present the tragic and true story of a couple, Paul and Hedwig Strnad, trying to join their family in Milwaukee to escape the Holocaust. The exhibit, called Stitching History from the Holocaust, was inspired by a letter and dress designs drawn 70 years ago.
December 11th, 1939. Dear Elvin, I received your last letter and thank you very much for your kind care. I was very glad to hear that you are troubling to get an affidavit of necessity for my wife as a dress designer. Would you be so kind as to let me know if you have any success in this matter? You may imagine that we have a great interest of leaving Europe as soon as possible because there is no possibility of getting a position in this country. By separate mail, I have sent you some dress designs my wife made. I hope the dress manufacturer you mentioned in your letter will like them. Hoping to hear very soon from you, I remain with kind regards to you and your wife, and with the best wishes for the new year. Yours sincerely, Paul.
Stitching History from the Holocaust is really a look at two different things. It's a very individual look at a specific couple and a specific family, but on a much larger scale, it addresses the huge void of talent, the loss of contributions to the world that were never able to be brought to fruition because of everyone that perished in the Holocaust and all of the hopes and dreams that perished along with them.
This exhibit takes 8 dress designs that were sent to Milwaukee in 1939 from a couple in Prague, Hedwig Strnad and her husband Paul, to a Milwaukee cousin in the hopes of getting immigration visas. The letters have been in the collection of the museum since before it was a museum. They were given to the Milwaukee Jewish Archives in 1997 by Burton Strnad, who was cleaning out his mother's basement and found them. He had no idea that his father had had this correspondence. His father is Alvin, who is the recipient of these letters.
And within the envelope was a red envelope, and within the red envelope were 8 dress designs, a picture of the woman and her husband, and a letter to Bert Strnad's father. And in that letter, they were seeking help in coming to America to escape the Nazis in Prague.
Paul Strnad in Prague knew that Alvin was trying to help him come to America with his wife, and he enclosed these sketches in the hopes that that would convince people in the United States that they would not be a burden on the economy.
Paine Strnad turned them over to the archives, never knowing, would they be on display. He just knew that they would be preserved.
And when the museum was installed in 2008, it became a focal point of our Holocaust section.
Well, one of our visitors came in, and when she came to this section, she said, "Oh my God," and the story is so poignant. And she said, "There's so much you could do with the dresses." I said, "Like what?" She said, "Well, make them."
And that was the first time we kind of had this sense of the story, that you could have this kind of tangible focus on loss and filling that void in some way to help us, kind of fill in the blanks of who Hedwig and Paul were and what the larger meaning of this story is.
Director Kathy Bernstein approached the Milwaukee Repertory Theater and spoke with the costume department.
Our shop manager from last season was contacted by the museum about this project, and after she saw the drawings, she was so excited about the project that she said, "We're in."
We received copies of the renderings, and then as project manager on this, I did a bunch of research into the period fashions, using period catalogs, magazines.
We gather all of our research, and then it's time to create patterns. We take fabric, cheap muslin, and we actually drape it on the form to create the patterns. We then cut out the pattern out of an inexpensive fabric. We make a mock-up of the fabric so that we can correct all the problems in the pattern without having to cut it into the real fabric.
The draper hands off the patterns to us once they're ready, and we cut out the fabric, and then we hand off the fabric pieces, the garment pieces, to the stitchers to assemble.
The tailoring techniques we're using are old standard techniques that they would have used back in the 30s that actually we still use today.
There was quite a bit of hand stitching, especially with the tailoring. The pad stitching and the bound buttonholes are all done by hand.
All the dresses are made of natural fibers and fabrics that we would have found in the time period, in the 30s. The only synthetic that I can think that we are using is the thread that holds them together. But Jessica has tried very, very hard to be as faithful to the period as we can.
3 of the looks have printed fabrics in them, and we obviously couldn't source those exact prints, so we had to find somebody to create them.
Margaret Hassett Guy has recreated the prints that Hedwig drew in her drawings. What's really unique about these is you can see the direct correlation between the surrealist movement in art and the prints. And Margaret went beyond Hedwig's designs, and she did research on her own and researched textiles of the period and art of the period and really brought an authenticity to it.
There is no place that was better outfitted than the Milwaukee Reps costume shop to do this. There are people who understand historical research with clothing. There are people who understand how to develop a design and to take it through a whole schematic and go through these things. And they were able to bring this level of professionalism that I don't think any of us entirely accounted for. They also pointed out the challenges very quickly about making the dresses.
They were given these two-dimensional paintings or drawings that you couldn't see what the back was. There was no indication of what the fabrics were. There was no indication of, if a dark spot was a shadow, or is it a fold, is it a pleat.
So everything that you see on display here is a work of interpretation by the Milwaukee Repertory Theater's costume department.
It wasn't enough to just copy. They wanted to be faithful to Hetty's designs.
And it really exceeded all of our expectations in terms of bringing this collection to life. And now we have this series of ensembles that are part of a larger story.
This is a way of exploring one person out of 6 million and who that person was, what talents they brought to this world, what they could have done.
But hopefully people walk away and they will have been enriched by it, and hopefully it gives them pause to think about their family, their history, and what they can do to pay honor to that moving forward.
The Stitching History from the Holocaust exhibit will now inspire people around the country with its next stop in Michigan. Learn more about the exhibit and the Strnads at the website stitchinghistory.org. We'd like to thank the Charles Allis Art Museum here in Milwaukee for their rich cultural gift to our city. Plan your visit to see the collections and the latest exhibitions at their website, charlesallis.org. On the next episode of The Arts Page, discover how downtown Delavan has been decorated by mural artists from all around the world. Learn how a blue dog from Louisiana is bringing art to schools. And glide across the room with ballroom dancers. I'm Sandy Max at the Charles Allis Art Museum. Thank you for watching. Please join us next time on The Arts Page.